Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, May 24th, 2020. We are here at Annesley United Church in Markdale, Ontario. And welcome to all of you who are watching us on YouTube. We're so glad that you've taken the time to join us this morning. And we're actually having a little bit of fun putting these services together. And so we hope that you're enjoying it as much as we're enjoying putting them on for you. I have with me today our usual cast of characters, but a couple of extra people who are helping us on the singing, and that is Jane Irwin and Barb Hutton. And so thanks very much to the two of them for joining in with us. A number of people have asked how they can help us, and there are a number of ways that you can do that. One would be simply when you're finished watching our fabulous video today, if you press the subscribe button at the top of the YouTube page there, that really does help us. And also, leaving a comment would be something we'd be really grateful for. So please use the YouTube channel a little bit more than you have been, and it increases our presence on YouTube, and it's just a good thing to do. So thank you very much for that. So without further ado, it's time for David to play us a prelude. As we light the Christ candle, we remember that Christ's light is always with us, in us, around us, surrounding us, and guiding us as we meet together. I'd like to share just a few lines of a poem by a poet named Mirabai, and it goes like this. "O friend, understand, the body is like the ocean, rich with treasures hidden. Open your innermost chamber and light its lamp. Within the body are gardens, rare flowers, peacocks, the inner music. Within the body, a lake of bliss. On it, the white soul swans take their joy." So we're going to begin this morning's service with our opening song, which is "Where Two or Three Are Gathered, I Am There, I Am There." You all know this now, so even though you're not here in the room with us, I'm expecting you all to sing along with us. And then right after that, we're going to sing our hymn, "Jesus, You Come to the Lakeshore." Thank you very much. So it's time for our opening prayer, and as has become our practice, I'll ring this bowl before we start, and during this time, just let your heart slow down and your thoughts evaporate if you can, and then we'll pray together, and then at the end, I'll ring it again, and today we're going to sing Spirit of Life as a response after the second ringing. So let us pray. Gracious God, today in our worship, let us open our minds. Let us open our hearts. Let us open our spirits. Let us open ourselves to the call of your Spirit. Let us open ourselves to the call of your love for all of creation. Let us open ourselves to the call of your deep creative power. Let us open ourselves to the call of your ongoing story. As we gather together in this online community, let us listen for the hopes and dreams we express together. Let our individual prayers and thoughts rise up like incense, and together, even in our separate places, form a tapestry of care and compassion above us and around us. Let us listen for those who are grieving or who are feeling lost. Let us listen for those who are at the end of their rope, or those who are having trouble making ends meet. Let us listen to our own spirits. Let us find there peace and calm amid the noise and the loss and the churning of the waters. Let us open ourselves to this day, to this moment. Let us connect to the power that lights us up from the inside. Let us light the inner pilot light again and be at one with your Spirit, O God, at one with love eternal, at one with each other. Well, this morning we are reading the very last chapter of the Gospel of John, chapter 21. Many people question the authorship of John 21 because it does have a sense of being tacked on at the end. Nevertheless, it is there, and it contains, for me, one of my favorite stories of the Gospel. And since today is the last Sunday of the Easter season, we've now been celebrating Easter for 7 Sundays. It is a very fitting one to end the Easter season with. So from John 21. After this, Jesus appeared to the disciples, this time at the Tiberias Sea, the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana, the brothers Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were all together. Simon Peter announced, "I'm going fishing." The rest of them replied, "We're going with you." They went out and got in the boat, and that night they caught nothing. When the sun came up, Jesus was standing there on the beach, but they didn't recognize him. Jesus spoke to them, "Good morning. Did you catch anything for breakfast?" They answered, "No." He said, "Throw your net off the right side of the boat and see what happens." They did what he said, and all of a sudden there were so many fish in it, they weren't strong enough to pull it in. Then the disciple that Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Master." When Peter realized that it was the Master, he threw on his cloak, for he was stripped for work, and dove into the sea. The other disciples came in by boat, for they weren't far from land, 100 yards or so, pulling along the net full of fish. When they got out of the boat, they saw a fire there with fish and bread cooking on it. Jesus said, "Why don't you bring some of the fish that you've just caught?" Simon Peter joined them and pulled the net to shore. There were 153 big fish. And even with all of those fish, the net didn't rip. Jesus said, "Breakfast is ready." And not one of the disciples dared ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Master. Jesus took the bread and gave it to them. He did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus had shown himself to the disciples since being raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Master, you know I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." He then asked a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Master, you know I love you." Jesus said, "Shepherd my sheep." Then a 3rd time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was upset that he asked him for the 3rd time, "Do you love me?" So he answered, "Master, you know everything there is to know. You've got to know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." And that is the end of the Gospel of John. What are our souls for? Do they do anything? Or do they just sit there inside of us like some kind of gelatinous blob of Big Bang infused essence? Many in our culture deny the very existence of the soul. After all, we are evolved creatures, and our souls could really just be the manifestation of our brain's active synapses tricking us the way that whole déjà vu thing does from time to time. And isn't it true that if we live in the world without soul, it's just so much easier? Why, we don't have to account for anything we do or concern ourselves with anything other than ourselves. We can consume as much as we want. We can get up tomorrow and do it all over again. We can dispose of everything we have and start fresh if we want. We could do this every day, but wouldn't we be the talk of the town? Or, like most church people, we might set aside one day a year to think about the soul. You know, the way we think about love on Valentine's Day, the one day reserved for the talk of love, and that, if you're lucky. Regarding the soul, Easter Sunday is our big day. On Easter, we get to crack open our minds and our hearts a little bit and admit, once we get past all the doctrines and dogma that we still adhere to and which clutter up our lives, let's face it, the central premise of Easter, that the soul cannot die. The soul is the essence of the light of the universe, the power of the inner beingness of us, the activity of energy that is deep and elemental and mysterious and gripping. And this energy cannot be destroyed. It was Albert Einstein who ratified that fact. The story of Jesus is the avatar of this. It's just an ancient way of saying what Albert Einstein said in an equation. And the Gospels tell us these things in images and stories and myths. And they've been adapted for us to be able to talk about something that's so powerful yet so mysterious it defies human language. How is it that the soul cannot die? But we do that only once a year. None of this Easter season stuff for us anymore. Why does the season need to go on for 7 weeks anyway, we might say, when the message is essentially the same from time to time? Yet here's the thing. When I get up each day of my ordinary life, and for me now that is my retired life, I want to know and live into that which makes me feel spectacularly alive. After all, it was Joseph Campbell who said that what humans really want is to find the story that makes us come alive. So in other words, I want Easter every day. I want to rise in the morning knowing that my spirit is active inside of me, powering me to make good choices, to think good thoughts and create good things each and every day. Don't you as well? I stayed a week one time at a Benedictine monastery. It was the hardest thing that I ever did. I wanted to see what the Benedictine rule might mean for me. What it meant was rising before dawn and before breakfast, having 2 church services, and then going to a silent breakfast. I was grateful for the silence. Back to church. Then a couple of hours to do your work or whatever it was you were going to do in the morning, and then back to church. Having lunch, back to church. You get the idea. A week at the monastery felt like a year's worth of worship services. So, all joking aside, what I did start to notice was that the rhythm of the prayer and the song spread so many times throughout the day, started to kind of have its way with me and started to create these grooves in me, sort of like those grooves that we used to see on those LP vinyl albums. And even after a week, I soon began to notice that my days were a little lighter and my thoughts were less dark and my energy so much better. in my everyday life, in my ordinary, run-of-the-mill, one day just like the other, kind of like our COVID-induced isolation life, I found that there was room for the deep, never-dying energy of the soul rising within me each and every day, moving me to think differently and to live a little more creatively in just about every aspect of my life. In short, it was as if every day was Easter Day. A couple of very famous authors in our time, Tom Harper, Canadian author, and Richard Rohr from the U.S., write about the soul and about the essence of the spirit in many of their books. Both of them would say that the deeper truths of the gospel stories are the understory that they tell of the incredible power of the spirit of the human, this spirit energy, this Christ-infused universal energy which rises within us. And so the story isn't quite so much just about Jesus, but rather it's informing us that we have the same spirit in us that he had in him, the same spirit that will move us and compel us, which bubbles up inside of us and pulses through us, and which, in the end, is immortal. It can't be killed and cannot be stopped. And that same soul, life-giving, spirit-bubbling energy that was Jesus is also us. The gospel is a pretty large story then when we see it in with those lenses. It's not just about a young 30-year-old amazing miracle worker, carpenter from the Palestine part of the world, but rather it's a universal story. It's a story that is about the soul of humanity living in us, in fact, living inside of everything, not just humanity, a soul which cannot die. The gospel story is a huge and great allegory of the soul's movement through birth, through life, and then through death. It's the greatest story ever told, we used to say. But the problem is that we have always thought that it was only about Jesus and had very little to do with us. But when we read as an allegory of the soul, we begin to see that it lives in us in the very same way. So all I really want from you today is a yes. Yes to this mysterious energy bubbling inside of us, propelling us and compelling us. Yes to that which is deep inside of us, which as Christians we call the Christ or the universal Christ, this spark of energy that cannot die, this soul, this dwelling place of the divine. Yes, that makes sense. The stories are kind of hard to understand sometimes, but that makes sense. So I mention this because the bravest, most devout, energetic, courageous, heart-on-sleeve disciple of them all, Peter, often said no. So much of the stories about him in all four Gospels are about the struggle that he had to assent to this person that Jesus was. He often denied even knowing Jesus, let alone having his spirit alive in him. And I'll bet that it was probably more than once when he said, to heck with all of this stuff, I'm going back fishing. I mean, who could blame him? His simple fisherman style of life was turned completely upside down by Jesus. And by times, he fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. But I like to think, and I guess I'm kind of projecting this a little bit onto him, but I think it sounds good. I like to think that he hunched that there must be more to life and that he wanted something deeper and more meaningful in his life. But then Jesus, who represented to him that something more, or goodness, or spirit, or truth, and who had a way about him that just seemed to exude the love of God, was killed, gone, crucified on a crude Roman cross. And so, once the bottom falls out of your life, what do? You go back to that which you know, which is fishing. Again, I imagine that for Peter, there was no larger, no something more, no everlasting, no ultimate, no basis for hope, no meaning or purpose to life, no spirit that will triumph over the powers of death and darkness. All I have, I can hear him say, is what I know. All I have is what I know, and that is fishing. So that's what he says. I'm going fishing. An actress by the name of Naomi Newman once wrote, "In life, on every fourth step, you are meant to fall down. Not occasionally, not once, not twice, but every fourth step. The ground opens up, the wind blows and knocks you over the head. You trip on a rock, your heart breaks. They close the left two lanes on the highway, making you miss your doctor's appointment. On the fourth step, all the forces gather to stop you." And she says, on some people, when they fall down, they lie there for the rest of their lives. This is how I think of Peter after his new friend, the friend of friends, the Christ, was crucified. And so it took the Spirit of Christ yelling at him from the shore, "Throw your nets on the other side, give it another go." And you can hear yourself, can't you, when you're reading that no, that's the same lake, it's the same fish on one side of the boat as it is on the other side of the boat. It's not going to make any difference what side of the boat you throw your nets on. But the story isn't about fish, is it? What it's about is the Spirit of the resurrected Christ, the part of him that lives forever and cannot die, rising there in the heart of this most rash, brash disciple. And what's important and most relevant, I think, to us is that it happened in his everyday life, doing the things he did every day, going out fishing, sometimes catching, sometimes not. The boring, routine, uninteresting landscape of his life was the very place where the Spirit of Christ rose up in his heart. You see, the one who is resurrected at the end of the Gospel of John is Peter. Peter comes back to life and goes on to do great things. Annie Dillard said that saying yes to a call to a life of spirit and truth, requires a daily commitment She likened it to keeping a lion, a raging lion, in your bedroom. And imagine doing that. But the lion, of course, is a metaphor for your fears or your failures or all the things that keep you from being authentically you. She said that you have to visit the lion in your bedroom every single day to keep asserting your mastery over it. Because if you miss even one day, then you won't have the nerve to do it the next. Last year, I got home from the hospital after having emergency heart surgery, and my days were filled with these thoughts. I could have died. Oh my goodness. And the other thought was, but I didn't die. Oh my goodness. And so I found that I had to renegotiate every single aspect of my daily life. I had to look at my values, my commitments. I had to sort out what are the most important things to focus on, the things that matter most. And that process is still ongoing. It's only been a year. Well, one thing I realized was this, that when I die, when that time comes, I want to die with a yes on my lips, not a no. I want to die knowing that I am completely spent, having lived every day of my life full of the Spirit that cannot die. It's a wonder that I had to suffer such an extreme event in order to learn this lesson. And I guess it was, if I think about it, it was that in my head, in my mind, I'd done all this processing for years. I know what the soul is, and I know where the soul is, and I know its effect on me and on other people. I can talk about it till the cows come home. It's something I've preached about for years, but what I didn't know was the heart knowing, the spirit knowing, that was where I needed to hear the message. And there's a fellow by the name of Stephen Nachmanovitz who describes this process as a heart breakthrough. It's like 3 words put together in one word, a heart breakthrough. And according to him, he says, a heart breakthrough is when you realize that your spirit is part of and one with the Spirit of life. It is when you learn that your little voice has become one with the larger voice. It is when you realize that the song that you sing is to the tune of the inner music of the spheres. And so, my friends, what I'd like to suggest to you is that the soul inside of us is not a useless blob of gelatinous, Big Bang infused essence, but it has a job, and its job is to lead us to heart breakthroughs. Our souls make us rise every day. So here's my pitch. Just say yes. Amen. So our hymn to finish our service with is I Feel the Winds of God Today. Thank you very much. Thank you, friends, for tuning in to our worship service here today. And I'm going to end with a blessing that comes from the Dalai Lama. It is a prayer that he says every day. I would be a protector for those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. I would be a lantern for those desiring a lantern, a bed for those desiring a bed, a servant for those desiring a servant. I would be, for all creatures, a jewel, an inexhaustible jar, a powerful spell, a miraculous remedy, a wishing tree. As the earth and its elements are in various ways for the enjoyment of all beings dwelling in all of space, so may I, in various way, a means of sustenance for the living beings near and far, for as long as time and all of us are not satisfied. Peace be with you. Amen.